I was 28 years old when I learned we were never alone. February 9th, 2026. I remember the date because it was supposed to be ordinary. My wife Rachel and I were watching the evening weather forecast in our apartment in Manhattan. The meteorologist, Sarah Mitchell, had been on air for maybe 30 seconds when it happened. Her voice caught mid-sentence. Today is TT today. Then the clicking started. This is the aftermath. Sarah stood frozen on live television, her eyes dilated to black circles, tears streaming down her face while her mouth produced sounds no human throat should make. The station tried to cut the feed. They couldn't. For 7 minutes and 43 seconds, 112 million people watched something take control of her body. We didn't know it yet, but Sarah wasn't alone. On a transatlantic flight, 17 passengers went rigid simultaneously. In Rome, 3 nuns in a cathedral removed their glasses and stared upward in perfect synchronization. Across 52 countries, thousands froze mid-conversation, mid-step, mid-breath, and they all made the same sound. Rachel grabbed my hand. Marcus, what's happening to her? I didn't have an answer. Nobody did. But someone had been expecting this. His name was David Harrison, a whistleblower I'd never heard of until he uploaded 143 pages of classified documents. While the world watched Sarah Mitchell's breakdown, the files claimed that governments had known about extraterrestrial signals for decades, that certain technologies, devices we use every day, hadn't been developed by humans alone. At first, people called it a hoax, a prank timed to coincide with a medical emergency. Then the screen started acting strange. My phone buzzed, then Rachel's, then every device in our building simultaneously. Messages from friends, from strangers, from block numbers, all saying variations of the same thing. Do you believe now? I pulled the battery from my phone. It kept buzzing. The government called an emergency press conference. A man I'd never seen before, Roland Pierce, stood at a podium and said what nobody wanted to hear confirmed. Signals of non-terrestrial origin have been detected and studied for years. We have protocols. We have been preparing. But his hands shook when he said it. That night, the power grid in Manhattan flickered. Traffic lights turned green in synchronized waves. Every television in Times Square displayed the same image, static that formed patterns if you looked long enough. People stood in the street, staring upward, unable to look away. Rachel and I made a decision. We had to leave. But leaving meant understanding what we were running from. David Harrison's file suggested something that sounded like science fiction. The extraterrestrials weren't in ships. They weren't physical at all. They existed as consciousness, transmitted through electromagnetic waves. Every cell tower, every satellite, every screen was a potential gateway. The documents referenced something called neurological synchronization, the ability to override human autonomy through specific frequencies. We've been carrying the invasion in our pockets for years. The real panic started when military jets scrambled over major cities. What were they supposed to shoot? You can't bomb a radio wave. You can't nuke a signal. Within 48 hours, 17 major cities reported mass synchronization events. Thousands of people standing motionless in public spaces, eyes black, emitting that clicking sound that made your teeth ache. Some never woke up. Others woke up different. Rachel's sister called from Chicago, whispering into the phone. They're at my door. They're just standing there, staring at the apartment. They haven't moved in 6 hours. The line went dead. We never heard from her again. We packed everything we could carry and headed north, away from cell towers, away from power lines. The Adirondack Mountains had areas with minimal electromagnetic signatures. It was our best chance. On the highway, we passed abandoned cars. Doors open, engines running, no people. Phones left on dashboards, screens still glowing. It was like the rapture, except the bodies were still here, just not the minds. But this wasn't about bodies and minds. Not entirely. The midpoint came when we found David Harrison's final message. Hidden in those classified files was a blueprint. Our technology was infiltrated or hacked. It was designed this way from the beginning. Components in every smartphone, every computer, every router. parts whose actual function was never disclosed to consumers or manufacturers. They'd been here all along, embedded in our infrastructure, waiting for activation. We built our own cage and lined up to buy tickets inside. Rachel found an old ham radio in a gas station we looted. We tried contacting other survivors using analog frequencies. Someone responded. A compound in northern Vermont had gone completely off-grid. No electricity except solar. No wireless anything. They claimed to be safe. We decided to test Harrison's theory first. If devices were the gateway, destroying them should create dead zones. There was an abandoned town 30 miles west. We spent 2 days gathering every electronic device we could find. Phones, laptops, smart appliances, car computers. We piled them in the town square and burned them. For 3 hours, nothing happened. No synchronization. No clicking sounds. We thought we'd found the solution. Then the lights came back on. Not the devices we destroyed, but the infrastructure itself. The power lines, the transformers, the substations. The signal found another route, and it brought them. The synchronized people walked into town at dawn. 47 of them, moving in perfect unison, eyes black, clicking in harmony. They weren't aggressive. They just surrounded the square and stood there, staring at us, waiting. Rachel whispered, "We have to go. Now." We ran. David Harrison's coordinates led to a cabin deep in the mountains. No electricity for 50 miles. No cell service. Just timber and stone and silence. We found Sarah Mitchell there. She was alive, conscious, but changed. "They showed me," she said, her voice hoarse. "They showed me everything. The universe is so much bigger than we imagined and so much more crowded." She laughed, but there was no joy in it. We've been screaming into the void for decades, wondering why nobody answered. They were answering. We just didn't like the language. The compound in Vermont went silent a week later. We never learned what happened. Other survivor groups reported similar fates. The synchronized people found them eventually. The signal always found a way in. David Harrison disappeared during a supply run. We found his jacket by a crop circle in an abandoned wheat field. Inside the pocket was a note. "They're not invading. They're downloading." We never saw him again. Rachel and I have been in the mountains for 6 years now. The world below hasn't gone dark. Exactly. Lights still burn in cities. Planes still fly. But fewer people walk the streets. And those who do move differently, they walk in patterns. They gather in circles. They stare at the sky for hours without blinking. Sometimes I wonder if they're happier now. If consciousness isn't a burden, they're relieved to surrender. Sarah Mitchell stayed with us for 2 years before she walked back down the mountain one winter morning. "They're calling," she said simply, "and I'm tired of resisting." We didn't stop her. You can't fight a signal. You can only try to stay out of range. This is the aftermath. A world where humanity learned it was never alone, and the knowledge destroyed us from within. Where our greatest achievement, our technology, became the very thing that enslaved us. My name is Marcus Chun. I'm 34 years old, and I'm one of the last people on Earth who still decides when to open their eyes.
We're gonna be okay.